So in order to review our writing, in order to improve our writing, what I've done is to give you an activity to do. And in fact, this is not just a one-off activity, it's an activity that you're going to have right through until I see some form of improvement in your writing. And the only way I can see that improvement, or will see that improvement, is when you sit the exam in May or June. I think is either June you're going to do that exam. And that's the only way I can see or assess your writing. And so for the entire term, you will be working in pairs, or some groups are larger than a pair. And you're going to continue to do activities like this, where I give you past paper questions and you work the past papers until I see some level of improvement. Well, I can give you individual work to do. And from the individual work, then I can say, all right, the writing has improved. But the real test for me is going to come when you sit the next exam, right? And the real test for you, because it's when you're in the exam, under exam pressure, then I want to see if you are able to write properly. And that's not what we have been doing. All right, so the first group that is going to present is Baker, Brown, and Williams. So you can go ahead and share screen. Go ahead for me.
Sir, are you seeing the screen?
Yes, I am.
Okay, sir. Okay, this is group 1, which consists of the members Jayla Williams, Soleil Baker, and me, Joanna Brown. And we will be talking about the peel approach, a method used to deconstruct a question to answer it properly. Question 1.
Explain 3 ways in which the transatlantic trade in enslaved Africans had a negative effect on West African societies. P, 3 ways in which the transatlantic trade of enslaved Africans had a negative effect on West African societies, whereby the reduction of the population, the increased wealth of African leaders and tribes, and the destruction of farm and housing lands.
Reduction of the population was 10 to 15 million due to the mass shipments of enslaved Africans from West Africa to the Caribbean. Raids and kidnappings also contributed to the reduction of the population. Some West African chiefs charged tax for couples to pass through their area. Other chiefs concentrated on the slave trade to profit rather than their political duties. Homes and farms were destroyed during raids.
Families were dislodged from each other and separated, and some were even killed during the raids, causing the population of Africans in Africa to decrease. The guns and ammunition that became trade items for the slaves provided security for some groups, but was also a means for them to raid other groups. This contributed to African chiefs and tribes to become wealthy. There was a major decline in agricultural production, which was a result of the destruction of farming lands, etc. The The transatlantic trade had a major impact on West Africa, politically, economically, and socially.
All right, stop, don't move. Don't move, remain at that question. Anyone from the class, any comments? Look at the question. Look at their peel. Any comment? Calissa,
Yes, sir.
look at the peel that they would have presented here. Do you have a comment on it?
It's good.
What about it that is good?
They explained it pretty well.
They explained it pretty well. All right. Anyone else? Baker, it's your group. So you going to the exam. So this group is Baker. Let us look at my stuff here. So it's Baker, Brown, and Williams. So Baker, Brown, and Williams are going to the exam. And for 9 marks, so this question is valued 9 marks in the exam, right? And so your first peel is your point that you're making. And you said 3 ways in which the transatlantic trade of enslaved Africans had a negative effect on West African society were by the reduction of the population, the increased wealth of African leaders and tribes, and the distributions of farm and housing land. So your 3 points, well, your 3 ways that you have mentioned here is 1, the reduction of the population, the increased wealth of African leaders and tribes, and the destruction of farmlands and housing lands. Am I correct?
Yes, sir.
All right, good. Go to 1B and let us see what you have for 1B. All right, go back up to 1A. Emmons. Emmons? Emmons is here? All right, now, ladies, there is quite a lot of things that would have happened wrong here because they could not get 9 marks just for this, right? In the exam, you could not get 9 marks for that. So your first peel, in the exam, so when you're doing the exam, you have to give a general statement. So the first general statement you could say, I would use what you have now as your first P to be your general statement. So that is a general statement, how you would start the paper. Then you will have to start to peel each of these points. So your first peel is reduction of population. Then again, you're going to peel increased wealth of African leaders and tribes. And then you're going to peel destruction of farm and housing lands. Now, when you peel all three of these points here, you would get roughly about 3 paragraphs. Following me, Baker?
Yes, sir.
Baker, Brown, and Williams?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
So if you should go into CXC and you write this here, they might give you 3 or 4 out of the 9. For CXC. So what I want you as a group to do, I want you to give me a general statement, but peel each of these points. So you're going to peel reduction of population. You're going to peel increased wealth of African leaders and tribes, because this would be point 1, point 2, and point 3. Following?
Yes, sir.
So work on that, but very good attempt thus far. Very good attempt, but it still needs little working on. All right, let us see the next group. Christian and Davis.
Sir, remember it's Christian and Groves now.
Yes, Christian and Groves. Let us change it.
Excuse me, sir.
Yeah?
Are we supposed to correct it in the PowerPoint presentation?
Yeah, man, correct it in the PowerPoint presentation and then you send it to me.
Okay, sir.
Jadidia, you're going to share screen?
Are you seeing my screen?
Yes.
Okay. Let me make it bigger. Sir, can you see?
Yes, I can.
Okay. Explain 3 ways in which the transatlantic trade enslaved enslaved Africans had a negative effect on West African societies. The transatlantic trade created tension between the tribes. For example, warlords and tribes began engaging in slave trade, which led to violence and lawlessness. Tribes and many different warlords in West Africa began to buy and sell slaves. The people of the tribe felt betrayed because their very own leaders began selling them to make money. This caused the rich to get richer and the people to suffer, which led to an uproar in violence. Before the transatlantic trade, there was peace among the West African tribes. The different West African religions got destroyed. For example, many Africans had their own religious beliefs, but this was changed by the Europeans. When the Europeans arrived, they realized that the Africans had their own religion and beliefs. However, the Europeans forced the Africans to believe in a new religion, which was Christianity. This resulted in upcoming West African generations to believe in Christianity, like ourselves. Africans' agricultural development was demolished. There was an extreme scarcity of food. The Africans had a continuing fear of captivity. This made the economic and agricultural development almost impossible throughout much of West Africa. The Europeans usually left behind people who were elderly, disabled, or otherwise dependent. This resulted in many Africans dying from starvation.
All
Okay.
right. Don't stick with the first one. Return. So your first point, so you're in the exam, and so your general statement in the exam, you start to write the paper, you could say, the question in the exam is explain 3 ways in which the transatlantic trading enslaved Africans had a negative effect on West African societies. You give a general statement in the exam. 3 ways in which the transatlantic slave trade had a negative effect on West African society was or were it created tensions between the tribes, it destroyed their religion, and it demolished their agricultural development. So that it would be a general statement. So far, you would have peeled each of those points, and that is very good, right? Excellent. So your first point now is the transatlantic trade created tensions between the tribes. Your example, for example, warlords and tribes began engaging in slave trade, which led to violence and lawlessness. Explain. Tribes and many different warlords in West Africa began to buy and sell slaves. The people of the people is that often I'm not seeing it
Of
clear.
the tribe.
Okay, the people of the tribe felt betrayed because their very own leaders began selling them to get money. Was it money alone that they tried to get from them? Was it money alone?
No, sir.
No, sir, but
Money and what?
sir,
Things like gold and silver.
Well, the
Guns.
gold things like mirror. You remember when we look at things that they would have offered in the from Europe, so they brought things from Europe to Africa. So you could say to get money, mirror, and other European goods. This cause, what is that? Read this part for me, the last part.
this
On
This
that,
caused
to get richer and the people to suffer, which led to an uproar in violence.
all right. And so before the transatlantic slave trade, there was peace among the tribe. The last part, so the explanation, while you could improve here, which is some of the things that they would have gained, the link here is that the truth is that the tribes in Africa, there always are people all over the world always had fight, right? They always, people always fighting. So a nice way to link it is to say, therefore, the link is like a conclusive statement on the point that you have made. You're following me?
yes, sir.
So the link now would be therefore the slave trade created tensions. So the point and the link, your point and the link is basically the same thing. You're just restating it in a different way. You're following?
Yes, sir.
Very good. So far, this is a very good attempt. Your second point is that the different West African religions, got destroyed. How you could have rephrased this, because you are writing in an exam, you could say another negative effect on West Africa was the destruction of their religion. So I would rephrase this point here. Another effect on West African society was the destruction of their religion. For example, many Africans had their own religious belief, but this was changed by the Europeans. All right, good point. When Europeans arrived, they realized that Africans had their own religion and belief. However, Europeans forced Africans to believe in a new religion, which was Christianity. This resulted in upcoming West African generation to believe in Christianity. All right, fair enough. Next one. African agricultural development was demolished. E, there was an extreme scarcity of food. What are the food? Give some examples of the food that were scarce. You can't just say that there was extreme scarcity of food. You have to give some examples of the food that African societies would have planted their coffee and all of these different stuff. They would have involved in palm oil, vegetables, and all of these different. Give some examples. All right. But why the African agricultural development was destroyed?
Sir, because when the Europeans came, they took away like majority of the people that could, like they took away majority of like the farmers.
Mm-hmm.
So, and the people that were left back, they couldn't really do anything at all. They couldn't like grow food. They couldn't, depend for themselves or anything like that. So they didn't have
That
any food to grow. So
very good, very good. But the point I want you to when you're explaining this point, because they left behind people who were elderly, you need to reinforce to the examiner that majority of the persons who were taken from West Africa were the young people. So you need to include young people in your explanation and explain why young people is valuable to the African society. Right?
yes, sir.
And so your last point now, this resulted in many West African society dying from starvation. All right, I can link. And also, you see, what you have for link could also be part of the explanation. And you just rephrase what you say here for your point in a different way, link as a link. But this is a very good attempt thus far. All right? And this is how I want you to develop your point. And when you are developing your points for the exam, don't pretend as if the examiner or the teacher knows what you're saying. It's like you're explaining something to a little child. Them no know nothing. So when you're writing, you write with that same mindset. Don't think that they know. Don't think that they know. You explain as if you're explaining to someone who has no knowledge about the issue. All right, so this is a very, very good attempt. And I like how you feel each of them, each of your points. The only thing I would work on how I rephrase or how you construct the P's. All right, so very good attempt.
So,
Next
sir,
group,
how
go
much would
ahead.
you give us out of the 9?
All right, out of the 9 in an exam. All right, so I would take off half marks here for this one, the last, where you have African agricultural development.
Mm-hmm.
was demolished. There was an extreme scarcity of food. I would give you 2.5 for this, 2.5 out of 3. I would give you 3 for this one, the second one, and the first one you would get 3.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
So you'd get about 8.5 out of the 9. All right. Next group. Next group is Davis and Harley. Davis and Harley. All right, Emmons and James. Emmons, James.
Sir, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Go ahead for me.
Okay. The pure approach. So, the first question was negative effects of the slave trade. Our point is economic incentives for warlords and tribes to engage in the slave trade promoted an atmosphere of lawlessness and violence in Western Africa during the time of the Atlantic slave trade. Evidence. Before the beginning of the slave trade, the citizens of West Africa were divided into 3 different societies: the tropical forest, the desert, and the savanna. These societies had their own political organizations and were independent of each other. The only time when people were sold into slavery was when their tribe lost a battle or when they were not able to pay their debt. However, this was not permanent and they were freed once their debt was compensated. However, after the start of the slave trade, most African chiefs did not abide by the laws. They sold their captives in slavery, and if that wasn't enough, they also started to kidnap people from their homes, whom they also sold into slavery for guns and other European products they used to conquer other tribes. Explanation. Africans were no longer able to trust their kinsmen as a result of other tribes kidnapping their families. This resulted in a lot of wars between the tribes in Western Africa, giving the Europeans greater control of Western Africa as the head of tribes would try to take over other tribes by selling their conquests into slavery in return for guns and ammunition. Link. The slave trade therefore had devastating social effects on Africa. Economic incentives for warlords and tribes to engage in the slave trade promoted an atmosphere of lawlessness and violence, creating tension in Western African societies.
All right. I've seen where you have started. Go down to the next slide. The next slide for me, please.
Sir. Decrease in economic growth. Point. Depopulation and continuing fear of captivity had economic and agricultural made economic and agricultural development almost impossible throughout much of Western Africa. Evidence. After the beginning of the transatlantic slave trade, there was little to no growth of economic and agricultural growth in Western Africa. Production of goods decreased as the young, strong Africans were removed from the society and brought to the Americas, where they were forced into slavery as they were needed to grow sugarcane in the Americas. Unemployment declined as most of the younger population was shipped from West Africa, leaving the sick older people who found it hard to go out in the field and work, which led to their agriculture crumbling. Explanation. The decreases in the economy and agriculture had many factors behind it. With the introduction of the triangular trade, many European goods replaced African goods in West Africa, reducing the need to plant as they now had European goods. The trades opened up new routes in the interior of Africa, giving the Europeans more areas to trade with Africans and reaching a wider percentage of the African population with their trade deal. Link. The depopulation and continuing fear of captivity made economic and agricultural development almost impossible throughout much of Western Africa and therefore led to many economic effects on Western Africa.
All right, stop there for me. You're in the exam and you get a question like this. What would be a first general statement that you are going to write based on those 2 points? What would be a general statement? The general statement is part of the question.
Point?
So go ahead.
Point?
Yeah. Somebody help her for me, please. How do you go about writing the general statement?
Sir, would it be like one negative effect is?
All right. So so the one negative effect is would be a point. The general statement would be, you're going to the exam, there are explain three negative effects of the slave trade. Your general statement would be three negative effects of the slave trade on West African societies were, and you list the three negative effects. Now, for each of the three negative effects that you would have listed, you're going to develop each of them. Because I see right here, you have decreasing economic growth. And then your point here is depopulation and the continuing fear of captivity made economic and agricultural development almost impossible throughout much of Western Africa. So one way in which you could start this is that one negative effect on, so your point would be one negative effect on West African societies was our depopulation was a negative effect on West African society. I have never heard a plane fly so low yet. In Jamaica, reminds me of Cayman. So, point. Sorry about that, lady. So your point would be the depopulation. Your explanation. After the beginning of the transatlantic slave trade, there was little to no growth of economic and agricultural. You're evident. No growth of economic and agricultural growth in Western Africa. Production of goods decreased as young, strong Africans were removed from the society and brought to the Americas, where they were forced into slavery as they were needed to grow sugarcane in the Americas. Yes, fine, yes. What are your 3 points? You're in the exam. I need to know your 3 points. For this group, what are your 3 points? You're going to the exam. What would be your 3 points?
sir, the reducing the economy, the lawlessness and violence, and also had depopulation as a point.
So what would be a third point?
Depopulation.
So you basically mix everything together. You see the issue that we're having here? Go up, go to the next slide. The first one. You said violence and lawlessness. Economic incentives for warlords and tribes to engage in the slave trade promoted an atmosphere of lawlessness and violence in West Africa during the time of the Atlantic slave trade. All right. Beautiful. This point is a perfect one. Violence and lawlessness is a perfect point. So this was perfectly developed. All right, let us see the next one again. All right, you have another one? All right. They were all right. So I understand what you have done. You basically use population to talk about two of your points. So this is how I would, your general statement should be, right? That three negative effects on West African society were increased violence and lawlessness among West African tribes, the decrease in economic growth, and the depopulation in West Africa. You understand where I'm coming from?
Yes, sir.
You understand?
Sir.
So once you see the paper, you need to, so you said three negative effects, and you said the three negative effects was increased violence and lawlessness, decrease in economic growth, and the reduction or the depopulation of West Africa. But from what you have done thus far here, I think you have perfectly peeled each of them. Each of them have been perfectly peeled. All right, next group. Laylord and Lorraine.
Yes, sir.
Go ahead for me. I want you to peel the one about conditions on the slave ship. That is the one I want. Go ahead. Go to the next one. Yes. So you're going to the exam and the question is three conditions of enslaved Africans on the slave ship using the peel approach. Go ahead for me. First point.
So, one condition of the enslaved Africans on the slave ship. Point. One condition of the enslaved Africans on the slave ship was cramped, limited space. Slaves were chained and movement was restricted. Slaves were unable to go to the toilet and had to lie in their own filth. Sickness quickly spread among them. Slaves were all chained together. If a slave died, the body could remain in the hold for hours, still chained to other living slaves. These conditions were very inhumane. Therefore, one condition of the enslaved Africans on the slave ship was cramped living space.
All right, you have another point from conditions.
One condition of the enslaved Africans on the slave ship was food scarcity. The European crew members only catered for a certain number of them, which wasn't sufficient enough for all the slaves over the period of time it took them to arrive in the New World. This led to them being stingy to the food they offered to the enslaved, like beans, corn, yam, rice, and palm oil, which would have bad effects on them in the long run. African slaves were often unable to digest the food carried by the European crew, in account of them allocating or developing various eating disorders. Many weakened quickly and died. Sick slaves were often denied food and left to die. Survival of the best fit. Therefore, another condition of the enslaved Africans on the slave ship was food scarcity.
All right, very good. So I see your peel. You would have peeled this perfectly, both of your 2 points. All right.
Yes, sir.
So most of the groups are on the right track. Let us see the next group, please. The next group is MacLeish. Is MacLeish and Norman?
Yes. No, Sir Morgan.
Morgan. Go ahead for me.
Sir, I'm the only one here though because Rena said that her Wi-Fi is giving
Yeah,
issues.
but you have the PowerPoint, correct?
Yes, sir.
Go ahead for me, please.
Negative effects on the West African societies. Point one effect is the impact of the economies of West Africa and West Central Africa. Evidence: the price Europeans paid for the slave rose from £3 per head in the 1680s to £30 by the 1800s. Between the 1600s and between the 1680s and the 1780s, the value of the African Atlantic trade rose sixfold. At its peak, trade was worth £47 million. By the mid-18th century, slaves were Africa's main export. In West Africa, the slave trade was as much as 95% of the value of their exports. Link. Therefore,
Before you move on, you remember the question asks negative effect, right?
yes, sir.
So you said right here that the price Europeans paid for a slave rose from £3 per head to £30. And then you said that it became a main, in your explanation, you said that it became a main export. What was the negative effect? What was the negative effect?
There's not a negative effect right here.
On West Africa? Go to the next point.
European goods were brought to Africa.
Mm-hmm. Go
Euro-
ahead.
European ledgers reveal the many things traded in exchange for people, including cloth, hard cash, iron bars, guns, gunpowder, textiles, pottery, glassware, beads, iron mongery, horses, and brandy. They became a vital part of the system of exchange between the Europeans and African traders link. Therefore, Africans received good European goods in exchange for slaves.
Your point is good. European goods were brought to Africa. One negative effect on West Africa was the introduction of European goods. Your your examples or evidence is perfect. Your explanation is weak. They became a vital part of the system of trade. We are not interested solely in the system of trade. In your explanation, you need to tell us how European goods, all of these goods that you have here, had a negative effect on the West African society. So your explanation is very, very weak here. All right. So I want to your point, rephrase a point, uh, to to let it point talk about effect. One negative effect, like how what you did. So you don't say one effect because we are not looking at effect. The question asks you, we're not looking just as effect. You can have positive effect and negative effect. The question asks you about negative effect. If you go into the exam and they ask you about effect on West Africa, then these could be okay. But it asks you about negative effect. And when you're looking at negative effect, you have to zero in how it impacted that society negatively. How the goods here on your second point, the clothes and the hard cash, the guns impacted West African society negatively. And you need that in your explanation, which is right here. Therefore, African received European goods in exchange for slaves. Or you could say, therefore, Africans, you could say, therefore, there was a negative effect on West Africa with the introduction of European goods. You following what I'm saying?
Yes, sir.
You sure you understand what I'm saying?
Yes, sir.
Because if you're going to the exam for a question like this, the examiner would say to you, but I asked the student about negative effect. Although she don't mention how it affect them negatively.
Yes, sir.
All right? So
Yes,
work
sir.
on it and send it to me.
Okay.
Next,
Mommy.
who is that?
Sir,
Go ahead for me.
you have another class now.
Oh, so our time has expired. So on Monday, we will work on group 8, 9, 10, and 11.
Sorry, you didn't call Kelly Edwards and Annie Denton.
I didn't? Sorry about that. All right. So on Monday, we will peel those. So other groups will peel. So far, what the groups that have presented thus far, just rework what you use, rework the question and send it to me. Make the changes that I have suggested, and then after that, uh, we'll see what we'll do after that. All right.
Okay, sir.
Enjoy the rest of the day. Hope it was a helpful exercise.